Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network, where we connect into a matrix of newsmakers to get to the heart of an issue. And watch out, they've got to answer in 25 seconds or less, or else. Let's take a look at that issue right now. Europe's higher education is in a tight squeeze between students fighting austerity cuts and fee increases and the ever-rising costs for teachers, new facilities, and research. The European Union ranks below the OECD average in both public and private funding of higher learning, and part of the budget battle in the European Parliament is the fight for more money for education. But there's also a trend toward so-called cost sharing. An increasing number of EU member states are raising tuition and fees. The OECD has long called for more research collaboration with the private sector in Europe, as is done in the US. Critics say that's selling out academia to market forces, a privatization of education, which they say should be a right, not just for the privileged few. Could continuing education and web-based learning be among the solutions? Are virtual campuses rendering some bricks-and-mortar universities obsolete? Or is that creating a two-tier educational system, and in turn, a two-tier society? Now, wired into this edition of The Network is, here from the European Parliament in Brussels, Doris Pack, chair of the Parliament's Culture and Education Committee and a member of the EPP Group. From the OECD studio in Paris, Barbara Ischinger, director for education and skills at the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, a forum for 34 industrialized nations. And also here at the European Parliament, Leslie Wilson, general secretary of the European University Association, representing higher education institutions in 47 countries. Let me ask a question to all of you, starting with Doris. Should education be a right, after all? Is it wrong to make students pay tuition?
Education is a right to everybody, and I think we should do everything that everybody can use this right, but we should also use possibilities from outside the education field to give help, financial help, if it is needed.
Okay, Barbara, where do you stand on that?
Every qualified candidate should have access to higher education, and a combination of funding has been advocated by OECD.
Okay, but isn't that easier said than done, Leslie? Speaking on behalf of the universities of Europe.
Yes, it is, but I still think as we want to have more people coming into education and more qualified graduates, we need to make sure that access is open to all those that have the right qualifications to be educated in this way. And then I think it's a discussion at the level of every society. How do you want to pay for this? Who should be paying? Public purse? Is it the private sector? Is it the students themselves? All
right, then you think government is giving enough of this a priority, or are they shortchanging education? Barbara?
Governments are looking in Europe into some solutions, and indeed we see countries where there is a lack of funds, and the contribution from students can be a solution. But before creating a new set of tuition, government must look into a grant program and a loans program, and Australia has shown very good examples here.
Okay, Australia, what about the rest of Europe? And what about this budget battle here at the European Parliament, Doris? Is there any chance that there could be more money for education?
I hope so, and I'm sure that at least national runners are aware that if they are speaking on Sunday on education and the high importance of education, they should give the money on Monday. So I think in this very moment we are still on a lower basis, and I hope very much that the negotiations between my colleagues of the Budget Committee and the ministers will bring us to a higher level. It is needed.
But governments are saying financial crisis, we got to cut back. Is that enough of a justification to cut education funding, as we've seen really in recent years? Leslie?
Well, I think there are huge differences across Europe. Some countries are massively investing in higher education, others are not, and I think they're taking a very short-sighted view on this. And it also, there's a risk of fragmenting Europe if some countries go in one direction and others go in the other.
Okay, that's a good question. Barbara, how much of a danger is there here of fragmenting Europe through this kind of policy, or divergent policies?
I don't think that there is one model for entire region of the world. And even individual countries might look into really diversity. And why not? Why would a business school rely heavily on public funding? Why can't they cooperate with the business sector and at the same time give also practical experiences to their students?
Okay, let's shift over then to the business sector, the private sector. Is there, Doris, is there a danger here that if we do go in that direction, we're selling out and privatizing education?
No, it's not privatizing education. We are trying to link the business world to the university. And I think sometimes we see that the universities are like an ivory tower. They should see that the people should be educated to live in a modern world, and they should know what they have to do. So I think it is a fresh influence which can come and which should be used. They should not overdo, but they should be linked.
Uh-oh, Leslie, ivory towers, you got to answer that.
Well, I think that, at one time it was that, but these years are long gone, and universities are really cooperating in a whole range of different ways, both on their teaching and continuing education and in research with the private sector. And they know fine and well they have to think through very carefully their strategies on how to do this and maintain their kind of responsibility to society, and at the same time try and bring in additional funds on projects that make sense.
Okay, but Barbara, don't you think, is there a danger, and I've read about this, aren't the universities, some becoming over-reliant on private funding that some say could hijack academia, the private sector wagging the tail of the universities? Or the tail wagging the dog?
Yes, it would be a danger if there were too many strings attached, especially. And I hope that professors and presidents of universities will also watch out and make sure that they have their own independence regarding issues of research and teaching.
Okay, Doris, where do you stand on that?
Education is one thing, and the experience of the professional world is another thing. But they are not, how to say, they are not working against each other. They should be seen as two bases on which everybody should have an interest to see how it works. And I think this is what we are working also on in this European Parliament. But I want to underline that we should not only look on the higher education, we should also look on the professional education on the lower level.
Okay, what about web-based learning? Do you think that's seen as, is that too much of a panacea for the problem we're facing now, Leslie?
I think it's a really exciting new development, the so-called MOOCs, the massive open online courses. They started in the US quite a while ago.
And this gives students the worldwide access to lectures and tutorial notes. Harvard University is one of them involved.
That's right. And now, there are lots of good examples in the UK. FutureLearn in Germany, both the big Maximilian University and the Technical University are launching new programs just to see. But first of all, we have to try and find out what that will really bring, who it benefits, what are the challenges, and so forth. Okay,
Barbara, what do you think about that? What do you know about it?
This is indeed enriching also the teaching, and it's exciting for students. Students today are so much used to the new technologies, and to include them into the classroom, and here I speak also about a combination, new technologies, open access to education, plus the traditional higher education institutions.
Okay, but Doris, isn't this making some bricks-and-mortar institutions obsolete?
No, I don't think so. It is not a danger. It is something in plus. It would be possible for somebody who has a profession, who is working in a job. He can do this combination with distance learning. I think it is great. The new technologies are helping a lot of people, especially those who have perhaps not the situation and the financial means to go to the university at the beginning. They can continue during their job. I think that is great, and we should not make a difference between both.
Okay, and then back to this issue about tuition, Leslie. You got your ear on the ground with all the students there. How much do you think the traffic will bear as far as raising tuition and fees?
Well, I think I'd like to just, follow up on what Barbara said. It's so different in each country. Some countries have a long tradition of having tuition fees, such as the UK, others not at all. And so there are big debates going on precisely that question. One thing we've seen, though, all across Europe is international students coming into Europe. Nearly every country now, in the meantime, has tuition fees for international students. Not EU students, but for those coming from outside of the EU. That's a very clear trend.
Okay, very good. Well, that's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Doris Pack, Barbara Ischinger, and Leslie Wilson. I'm Chris Burns. And until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.